Our next author, Kate Johnson, says if her life were a book, she could have used a better editor. She didn't start writing until her 50s when she had a wine-facilitated epiphany at her ladies' monthly book club night, criticizing a particularly uninspired choice. I want to know what that is. After that, but before she sobered up, she found the courage to lock herself in the guest room, the only space in the house with an uncluttered desk, and began writing. Her husband and teenage children have not heard from her since, but they can be found roaming the streets of St. Charles at night searching for dinner. Feed them. They are good people. Kate Johnson.
Thanks, Frank, and Kevin, and Ann, thank you. Tasha, you're hard to follow wherever you are. There was an old man from Peru. Start out there now. Okay. Here's some background on my reading. It takes place about a quarter of the way into a book I named Muppy and the Music Makers. It has 3 characters, and they take turns narrating. And it takes place on Chicago's Southeast Side in 1992. 2 of these characters are meeting for the first time here, which is important because the 3rd character desperately needs to keep them apart. So meet Pauline, a shoe clerk and psychic medium, who rents the shoe store's break room to do her readings in. She lives in the trailer court and follows a spirit guide who's convinced her she's of Native American heritage. Also meet Eugene, who narrates this scene, a cultured and accomplished black jazz pianist who stopped performing, moved into the neighborhood, and turned into a recluse following the death of his unfaithful wife. So, here we go. I was tempted to head home from the library, it being more excitement than I'd had all month. But I forced myself to drive east to a shoe store on Ewing Avenue that promised a shoe for every foot. I was 6'1", in the normal range for height, but possessed unusually long hands and feet. My fingers could handle a 12th on a piano, a wonderful advantage for a pianist, but my feet were a size 15, a disadvantage for a pianist looking for shoes. I'd noticed the store before because there was no way you could not. The building was massive, and letters taller than I read, Ronald's Shoe Emporium. I found a parking space in front. In fact, mine was the only car. I stepped inside and a bell tinkled overhead. G sharp. A man looked up from behind the counter. "Paulini!" he yelled. He sat on a stool behind the counter, holding a jigsaw piece in the air. I walked closer, amused to see a jigsaw puzzle being constructed on a checkout counter. The voice that must have been Paulini's yelled back, "I think your break's over." It was a very large puzzle, 1,000 pieces, the box read, of a stone mill house with a water wheel, a stream cutting across the scene diagonally. I hadn't thought to begin a puzzle in my home. It was a good idea, but not 1,000 pieces. "I got 4 more minutes," he yelled back. Didn't stores use intercoms these days? I tried to recall the last time I'd heard employees shout across a large store and failed. The man's face had gone red, and he was breathing hard. The buttons of his shirt strained along his belly, his belt cinched below the worst of it. "You had 4 minutes half an hour ago," Paulini grumbled, walking out from a side room. I wondered if the 2 of them were married. It seemed like a classic husband-wife argument. As she approached, I could see she was his physical opposite, slender and quick, walking with determined, pigeon-toed steps. When she got near, I could feel her, vibrating with energy. "Hi, I'm Pauline, and I am sorry at my employer's lack of interest in your footwear." She reached out for a quick handshake. Light gray eyes flashed across me, nearly silver under the fluorescent lights of the Emporium, eyelashes and brows pale to near invisibility. Her hair, a mix of silver and blonde, gathered in a short ponytail that jutted out the back of her head like motion lines, tagged onto cartoon characters to denote rapid speed. Some escaped to fall on her face, and she exhaled to push it off. The fine strands fell back, and she gave up. She smiled at me now with a sizable overbite, a smile so large I felt myself return it. But you can see he has more important things to do at this moment. I'm at a crossroads here. He gestured at the puzzle. You must be Ronald, I said. I'm Richie. Ronald was my dad. He motioned to a faded photograph hanging above the door, then returned his attention to the puzzle. He didn't see a reason to change the name after his dad crossed over, Pauline explained. Why take a chance, shaking up a well-established business? I glanced around. As far as I could see, I was their only customer. But I nodded at Pauline, who was staring at me intently. I found her pale eyes disconcerting. I understand, I replied, wondering what other shoe stores operated nearby. This store is 67 years old, Richie said, opened in 25, the only store in the neighborhood to survive the Great Depression and 9 major wars. I started counting in my head, but at 3, Pauline spoke again. A lot of our business is mail order now. We ship all over the U.S. and even Canada. I just sent size 16 waders to Prince Edward Island. You don't even want to know what those cost to ship. The store itself is almost a warehouse. But what can I help you find? I see you as a wingtips man. I would ponder the wars later. I do like wingtips, I agreed. But nowadays I've been walking a lot for exercise. So I thought I should buy shoes for walking in. As opposed to walking in shoes, I buy for other reasons, if you understand the distinction. Pauline laughed. There's not a thing you could say about shoes I wouldn't understand. I see it. Size 15 narrow. That is correct, I said, surprised. She hadn't been looking at my feet. You know that's part of a shingle, don't you? She asked Richie. Of course I do. His gaze shifted from the stream bed to the roof. Now, what kind of surface do you walk on? Concrete, gravel, asphalt? With Richie taken care of, she turned full energy on me. She strode down aisles and I hurried after, past thousands of shoes in alarming sizes. We stopped in front of sneakers, the aisle of flaming blaze of pigments I squinted against, hesitating. She read my mind and continued until she reached sturdy shoes in somber colors, something that wouldn't look absurd on a man my age. She orated on what I should be looking for, as opposed to what I reached for, until I gave up any hope of being involved in my purchase. I tried to fling my thoughts in between her opinions, but it was like I was riding an old horse, trying to merge into highway traffic. I couldn't recall the last time anyone had spoken to me with such force and passion, let alone about my feet, and I would have fled if I'd thought to know where we'd left my old shoes. But eventually, with her guidance, I found an excellent pair of walking shoes, so much better than the ones I'd been wearing, I lost interest in getting them back. Along with these shoes came stern instructions of what to look for when buying socks. Finally, she was satisfied. I was sweating. While I boxed 2 pairs, she boxed the other 22, returning rejects to their stacks. She grabbed my old shoes tucked under a stool. I followed her to the checkout. I could have been mistaken, but I believed Richie was holding the same puzzle piece. Otherwise, it appeared to be a bit of shingle again. Pauline gave me the total, which wasn't insubstantial, but I was accustomed to my shoes costing more, and she assured me that not only were these quality, but that a lifetime guarantee covered a whole list of components, which she ticked off as if I were taking notes. I leaned on the counter and smiled at her earnestness. Usually people this unstudied were under the age of 10. Sunlight flooded through the pane glass window, making a halo around her head. When she finished, I handed her money. She reached to take it. Her hand was red and chapped, her nails short. A Band-Aid circled her index finger. She stopped midair to stare at my hands, then looked at me in surprise. I couldn't imagine what was surprising about $20 bills. Are you a surgeon? Her light eyes studied me. Goodness, no. I was taken aback. She must be more accustomed to 5s and 10s. I could faint at the sight of a bloody nose. Her eyes flashed silver, because the Holy Spirit runs through your hands. My breath caught. I'm a musician, I managed to say. You must be a very good one. She tilted her head. I got the feeling she was thinking hard. Then her eyes lit up, and she gave me that smile again. You play the Apache Mescalero fiddle, don't you? Why, no, I said in surprise. The Sioux cording flute. I shook my head. I could see my answers disappointed her. I tried to redeem myself. But I've played a flute from a Lakota tribe in Minnesota, and it was a lovely instrument, though I could not call myself proficient. She nodded. Not many people play the Sioux cording flute. I smiled. Not many people have heard of it. Got it, Richie thundered. I jumped. He looked at us in triumph, then focused on Pauline. Are you going to take his money or make him stand there all day, listening to you babble? Her hands went to her hips. It's called customer service. We are trying to build relationships with our patrons. Humans are so much more than their feet. I could feel this was part of a much larger argument between them. Yes, I suppose I should get going. Wounded, she took my money and turned to the register. I felt badly. I certainly hadn't meant to offend her. This reminded me why I went out so seldom. I tried to repair the moment by turning to Richie. I'm sorry I wasted her time with my questions. I know she has important work to do in your shipping department. He reconsidered the piece he'd taken and exchanged it for another, a bit of blue and white, possibly the stream, possibly the sky. I couldn't tell from where I stood without my bifocals. She spends too much time in the break room is what she does. That is no longer a break room, Pauline said stiffly. I pay you good money for that room. I was getting the uncomfortable impression this poor woman lived here. I appreciate your help, I told her, no longer able to hide my eagerness to leave. It was my pleasure, she responded formally. Her smile was gone. Her lips barely stretched over her teeth. I fled Ronald's Emporium in my new shoes. When I got home, I kept them on. Pauline had advised me to wear them for small stretches before I used them for a long walk, but they remained comfortable throughout the evening. I heated a can of soup and prepared a small salad, bounding across my kitchen. Afterward, still having too much energy to read Gorky, I went to my piano. I opened my hands and flexed my fingers, remembering what that woman had said. The Holy Spirit ran through them. I'd never heard it put that way, let alone from a shoe clerk, and I contemplated such an unexpected insight. That was exactly how it felt in my best moments, a feeling past words. I wished I'd handled my departure more gracefully, and realized now I hadn't even thanked her. Maybe new wingtips would be in order. I laid my fingers on the keys and closed my eyes, choosing to ignore the sheet music before me, asking the Spirit to lead them instead.